right, welcome back to the Get Out of Your Comfort Zone interview series, where we engage thought leaders and experts about the challenges that they have had in stepping outside their comfort zone in their lives and advice that they might have for the rest of us. I'm Andy Molinsky, and today we have a very special guest, David Burkus. David Burkus is the author of The Myths of Creativity, Under New Management. He's a regular contributor to a variety of different outlets, including Harvard Business Review and Forbes. His work has been featured in Fast Company, the Financial Times, Bloomberg, Business Week, etc. So I'm very happy to have David here, and I'm curious to hear what he has to say. So welcome, David.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So the focus of these, thanks for being here. So the focus of these interviews is on understanding the challenges of stepping outside your comfort zone as leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, writers. And so I thought that we could begin by having you share with us an example that comes to mind from your work life of stepping outside your comfort zone, what it was, why it was challenging, how, if you have, how you've been able to overcome that.
Yeah, so for me, probably one of the most defining areas where I was outside of my comfort zone was actually, I had a little bit different doctoral experience than most academics. So I got married fairly early. I actually got married the day after undergraduate college graduation, right? Which I don't recommend to anyone, but that's not my point. We got married that early because we wanted to spend as much of that summer together as we could, because that fall my wife started medical school. And I went into the industry. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for pretty much her whole medical school and residency. And then it was sort of time for me to go back, right? And me to go back to graduate school, do what I wanted to do, all that sort of stuff. The issue is at that point, like, we make location decisions based on her. So I couldn't just apply to a bunch of the sort of traditional PhD programs and go be an indentured servant to some big land grant university for 4 years while I worked on a doctorate, because we couldn't move. We had to be where she needed to be. So I looked at almost exclusively those sort of practitioner doctoral programs, the ones that are designed for late career executives who want to retire and teach a little bit and consult a little bit and all that sort of stuff. So that's what I ended up having to look at, which led to probably the most uncomfortable orientation I've ever been a part of. So I'm there, and I am at this point probably 26 years old, and for some reason they let me into this program. And everyone else in the room, there's like 40 people in my cohort, and everyone else in the room is, I'm finishing up a 30-year career in the automotive industry, or I've been in the Navy for 25 years, and now I'm going to go be a leadership consultant. And all of these people that I'm just sitting there, like, they're going to go through this program, hang a shingle on the door, and have all of these experiences and networks and all that sort of stuff to bring in business into their lives. And I'm realizing, like, okay, I'm not that. I'm the token youngin', and I'm going to need a totally different strategy if I'm going to come out of the end of this 4 years as successfully, because I'm going to have to build my own networks, my own platform, my own everything in this regard. To be honest with you, I think that actually put me at a little bit of an advantage, because being out of that comfort zone, there's sort of two tracks, right? The traditional track for academics, the one that you actually outlined so well, your own experiences with going from graduate student to tenure in Reach. That's kind of the traditional track. Then there's the other track that this program was designed for people who are in industry for so long. And neither of those tracks worked for me. So I had to kind of hack together something that worked. And as a result, I kind of think I put together a plan that allowed me to go further faster, because I didn't really have to follow the rules and the script and all that sort of stuff of either program. So it was definitely an incredibly uncomfortable first couple days in our first on-campus residency with all of these people, because essentially I was young enough to be their child. But it instilled in me this idea that, like, okay, I'm going to have to build this and put this together myself. And as a result of that, it was definitely painful, but as a result of that, I think it's worked out pretty well so far, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's interesting. It's funny when you mentioned, when you were first describing the situation, it sounded almost like cinematic, like in a movie, like, walking into that room, seeing all those people who are so much more experienced, maybe even hearing their stories. I imagine a lot of people listening to this have had that feeling, almost like the imposter syndrome in a way.
Yeah.
Like who am I to be in this room? Like,
Yeah.
do you remember what that was like? Or if maybe you didn't feel that? I'm curious.
No, I mean, it was very much that. I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome because, I think imposter syndrome, I think a lot of people feel it, and it tends to be that, like, I tricked people and that's why I'm here. It was much more of that, just, I literally don't deserve to be here, right? I'm not faking it, and like they think I do, and I don't think I do. I think everybody thought I didn't deserve to be there, myself included, right? So I'm not sure what that's called. It's probably something lower than imposter syndrome, but definitely, I mean, that was literally what it felt. I mean, to talk about the cinematic moment, I mean, there was everybody introduce yourself, and you hear the name, and there's the recap of their 30-plus year career as an executive, and then there's me, and this is literally what I said, because at the time I was still in the pharma industry. I said, "Hi, my name's Dave, and I sell drugs out of the back of my car." And then we just moved on to the next person. And if they were interested, they came up and sort of explained it. But I wanted to get it over with so quickly because I didn't stack up to everybody else. That's what I said. "Hi, my name's Dave, and I sell drugs out of the back of my car."
So it's interesting, like, also that you described, in retrospect, how it maybe opened up an opportunity for you, or it sort of made you motivated in a way to try to figure out, what your strategy was going to be. I suspect that there's some people in that situation who wouldn't have found it sort of construed as a challenge or as an opportunity, but kind of would have like gone in the, in the dumps. They would have like started feeling, worried and depressed and feeling like they really don't belong there, and maybe even tried to avoid and so on. It sounds like, at least the way that you describe it, you didn't do that. What would you attribute that to? Just kind of who you are, how you say a bit about how you were able to kind of rally in a way from that initial moment.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think in my situation, sort of, I knew that this was my only option because I couldn't go that traditional route. I mean, so much of, like, when we say comfort zone, I really think about there are several different career paths that you can go on that actually follow a really scripted trajectory for you, and you don't have to take any big risks with your career. My wife is actually a great example of that. She went to undergrad, to medical school, to residency, to getting a job. Like, literally, she sent a text message and got a job once because it's so sort of scripted, right? And I think it's the same thing kind of in academics. You go into the traditional graduate student PhD where you're getting a stipend, you're working, you're teaching the principles classes, and then you're going through the interviews that happen usually at the annual conference for whatever discipline that you're in. There's a routine, there's a script you're supposed to follow. And I think probably the kicker in this situation, it was hugely uncomfortable, but I knew going in that I was not the script of their average student, nor was this the thing that people my age were supposed to do. So I think a lot of it was just going in knowing this is going to be uncomfortable, but I can't use either script, so I have to write my own as I'm going. I have to sort of like jump and build the airplane on the way down.
It's interesting. I think this is a nice segue actually to the next question I wanted to ask you, which is advice that you might have for young people kind of making the transition for oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes from university life, the world of a student, being a student, to the world of a professional in a way. I think a lot of students, young people, have a version of the experience that you're talking about, walking into a room, walking into a meeting and thinking like, what the heck am I doing here and what can I possibly contribute? But at the same time, they might have honest ambitions of wanting to ultimately be a leader, and really make something of their career. What advice would you give young people around stepping outside your comfort zone and perhaps learning to become a leader?
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm obviously biased because of my own experiences, but I'm not really sure that logical trajectory is good for anybody. So there's a fascinating study by Adam Kleinbaum and around sort of who becomes a structural whole inside of organizations. Now, sort of back up to just top line of 30 years of research on structural holes. This gentleman named Ronald Burt came up with the idea that there's all sorts of value unlocked when you're actually the person that connects two communities together instead of being deeply embedded in that one community. So follow up, this gentleman, this researcher, Adam Kleinbaum, does the study on, okay, well, inside of a large organization, let's say a 20,000 person organization, who are the people most likely to become structural holes and thereby become leaders, become influential, unlock a lot of value and ideas for the organization. And what he found was that he categorized it as the people who became the structural holes were the organizational misfits, which is his term for it. And these are the people that don't just climb that sort of corporate ladder. They're willing to make lateral moves so that they gain experience about what another division looks like. They're willing to sort of move around. They're willing to sit at some totally other table in the lunchroom, right, in order to get to know that community. They're willing to do things that if you are upwardly mobile, if you're trying to send the message, especially in your early 20s, that you're upwardly mobile, you're supposed to sort of suck up to the people above you in your little silo and trust that they'll have your back and that as they climb, they'll pull you up with you. That's the most common advice. And Adam's research really speaks to a different strategy, which is bounce around, move around, get to know as many people as possible, because 10 years down the road, you'll be the one with all of the connections throughout the whole organization, not just up and in that little silo. So I think there's a lot of value in being that sort of organizational misfit. And I think that's what I was doing to some extent too. I didn't know it. This research wasn't even out at the time. But really it was that idea of I'm not following either sort of logical path. And as a result, I've gotten to know people sort of from both ends. Most of the people who were in my doctoral program, I would argue, didn't actually ever make inroads with the traditional academic community, whereas I kind of did because I was trying to go back and forth. And as a result, I collaborated with a lot of people that either came out of other programs that were traditional research programs and or people that taught my program. I kept it up and showed an interest in the research base too. So I'm sort of floating between these two worlds, and I think it's benefited me tremendously because I sort of didn't follow that path, right?
Yeah.
There's a quote from G.K. Chesterton. It's something I'm gonna ruin it, but it's something to the effect of like, I attribute my success to listening carefully to the very best advice and then going away and doing the exact opposite.
It's interesting because, truth be told, by the way, I know Adam Kleinbaum. He went to my PhD program. He's at Tuck, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's one of my favorite studies. And so I'm working on a new book, and I've dedicated almost an entire chapter to it because it's such a fascinating study.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, he's a really good guy too. So it's interesting that you say misfit, though. Is that his term? Because
that's his term. The title of the paper is something to the effect of organizational misfits and structural holes. It's
an interesting concept because the way you portrayed it, at least at sort of face value, doesn't feel necessarily like misfit. Obviously, is a pejorative term, and maybe it's sort of like a tongue-in-cheek use of misfit. But like what you just described to me sounds almost like the rotational programs that you see in major companies, right? With the idea that if you have experiences in multiple places and you can really take advantage of them and you can cross silos in a sense and not even see the organization as a silo, ultimately through your networks, through your experience, through your expertise, that gives you a sense of power in the connectedness. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's the aim of a lot of those high potential programs. A lot of those are usually only 18 months long, and we rotate you to maybe like 3 other divisions. And then they're very scripted. They're almost always some time in marketing, some time in accounting and finance, and then some time in operations, right? Whereas this would be, I think, even to a further extent of like spending time with HR so that you understand the legal ramifications of managing your team, right? And sales, even just the gap between sales and marketing is huge, right? And most of these high potential programs, we keep you in home offices. So we keep you with the marketing team. Marketing is a whole lot different than sales. I learned that when I was carrying the bag in pharma, right? That these are 2 different communities, even though they're in one sort of division in a lot of these programs. So I really think it's a lot broader than that. The other thing is it's sort of, those programs are great, but they're also very limited, right? Not everybody gets to do the rotational program. So what do you do if you're still have aspirations of being a leader, but you didn't get picked to be in a high potential program where you sort of create your own by willing to be this organizational misfit?
It's interesting. I like that idea. And when you think about it, I think a lot of university students, or at least the experience of a student, a lot is given to you. It's that, you have a catalog of courses that you choose. You have a major you select, and then you select within it. When you take a business course and there's a case study, the data is in the case study. It's all bounded. It's all limited. You're given things. And then all of a sudden, what you're saying, I think, is that to succeed and to ultimately become a leader, you kind of have to break that paradigm in a way, right? So that's I imagine that's quite a leap for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's really fair. I mean, truth be told, I'm not really a big fan of the case method that's used in business school unless you're trying to be a management consultant, because that's about the only situation in which you'll be dealing with a case. Come in and solve a prepackaged problem. In every other situation, I think choose your own adventure is a way better strategy because life is a choose your own adventure novel.
That's cool. Choose your own adventure. I like it. All right. Well, this is great. I really appreciate your advice, your tips. That's very insightful. And we'll look forward to your new book when it comes down the pike. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. And everybody who's watching, stay tuned because Andy is going to interview Adam Kleinbaum about that study in a future episode, I am sure. So thank you again so much for having me.